What's up, YouTube? JM Comics here. This is the end. The end of 2022. But This Is the End is also the name of a 2013 movie with quite a unique concept. A group of 6 Hollywood celebrities playing themselves are trapped in James Franco's house during the end of the world and struggle to survive the situation and each other as they figure out why and whether this really is the end for them. Before I go any further, spoiler warning for this movie and mature content warning, as this is also a very gory and raunchy film and I will reference a few of those events. As I was saying, while there were small cameos from celebrities like Channing Tatum, Emma Watson, and the Backstreet Boys, the main cast is comprised of 6 actors: Seth Rogen, James Franco, Danny McBride, Jay Baruchel, Jonah Hill, and Craig Robinson. As the movie progresses, they figure out that they were left behind during the biblical rapture, so they grapple with morality, and by the end of the movie, 3 characters end up in heaven, and 3 of them end up in hell, though we never directly see the latter. In this video, my last video of 2022, I will rank the 6 main characters morally from the best to the worst and explain why I rank them and where I rank them. I have tons more movie related videos planned for next year, and I'm free to any suggestions, so like and subscribe to the channel for more movie content. Also comment your thoughts on This Is the End, as it may just be my favorite comedy of all time. I don't know, I just saw it 4 days ago, but I really like it. And before I even start, Happy New Year's, and I hope you all have a blessed 2023. Let's get right into it. And starting off our ranking is the most morally good character in this movie. We're going from good to bad, and that is Craig Robinson. At the beginning of this movie, Craig is shown to be just as sinful and profane as the other thespians at James Franco's party. He wears a shirt that literally says, "Take your pants off," or panties off, cusses profusely, and was not taken up to heaven for the start of the rapture, which speaks volumes itself. However, unlike most of the actors and actresses, Craig was not as malevolent and demeaning of Jay, although he did mock his hippie-like appearance of Emma Watson. Once the apocalypse begins, Craig leaves his friend Aziz Ansari to fall into the underworld, which is kinda sickening when you think about it. After the initial eruption of the rapture, the inner good of Craig starts to shine through, with his understanding of Jay and willingness to accept his theory that they are all living through the biblical rapture. When he loses the match pulling and has to go get water from the basement, Craig goes through with it, unlike Seth Rogen later on, and he even chooses to go with Jay to raid the neighbor's house, again, knowing good well firsthand what is out there. When Jay considered abandoning Rogen and Franco, Craig convinced him that they all had to stick together. He could have settled for Jay's plan, which was way more sustainable, but chose to go back for his friends. And he even saves Jay's life during this scene. At the end of the movie, once Franco's house burns down, Craig offers to sacrifice himself for the others, distracting a demon. For his humility, he is sucked into heaven in a beam of light. While 2 other characters do sacrifice themselves, Craig is the first to do so and does not know that he will go to heaven for his sacrifice, making his sacrifice the most noble and heroic. While Craig admits to gouging a man's eyes out in a bar fight and lets his pal Aziz die, in the end, he serves as an understanding friend to the ostracized Jay and makes the greatest sacrifice out of all these men, earning him the title of the most morally good on this ranking. The main character of the film, Jay Baruchel, earns second best character on this ranking. From the beginning of the movie, Jay feels like he's ostracized by the Hollywood elite. Unlike the rest of the actors and actresses at Franco's party, he is not as into the Los Angeles lifestyle that they live. Rather than go to the party, he just wanted to smoke weed, eat candy, and play video games at Seth Rogen's apartment in an attempt to salvage their fractured relationship. Speaking of which, prior to the events of the movie, Jay had visited Los Angeles and stayed at the Four Seasons instead of Rogen's house, as he knew that they were drifting apart. He hides this fact from Rogen until Danny reveals it to the gang months later. Once the rapture begins, Jay tries to save other actors, but for the most part fails. He is the most level-headed of all the survivors, and unlike the rest of them, doesn't make many brash decisions. He also tries to convince the others to save the random man who pops into their house before that guy gets his head chopped off. Jay is, however, very self-righteous and acts like he's leagues better than the other characters, which, as Craig proves, he is not. He unjustly punches Jonah Hill while Jonah is defending him from Seth after he finds out about the Four Seasons fiasco. He volunteers to raid the neighbor's house after Seth refuses to go, which is a pretty good thing. And after he and Craig go there, he tries to convince him to abandon the others, but Craig refuses to do so and a demon attacks them. At the end, Jay doesn't sacrifice himself, but just admits his wrongdoing to Seth, resulting in him getting sent to heaven. This could imply that he was already very morally good, but considering how many more upright things Craig does compared to him, Jay gets second place in this ranking. Seth Rogen is very neutral throughout this movie, so he is naturally next on this list. He rarely has any ideas of his own, and mostly just follows along with the others, usually Franco. He invites Jay to stay at his house whenever he visits Los Angeles, and tries to get Jay to fit in with his Hollywood friends. After he and Jay initially see the Rapture's beams of light, he lies to the others when Jay tells them about it to avoid looking like an idiot towards them as Jay does, throwing his friend under the bus. He additionally did what he promised Jay that he would not, and ditched him at the party. When the boys are trapped in the house, Seth tries to comfort Jay, convincing him that this is an opportunity for him to make friends. Seth doesn't really have any personal beef, not even with the troublesome Danny, until it is revealed that Jay didn't stay with him last time he visited LA. He selfishly refuses to go to the neighbor's house when he fairly pulled the burned matchstick, so he had to go, but he doesn't, leaving Jay and Craig to do it, effectively leaving them for dead. He interrupts Jay's exorcism of Jonah Hill out of spite and disbelief, which leads to the revelation to Craig and Jay that Seth and James had extra food stashed. Even after the group essentially agrees that they are living for the rapture, Seth still remains very skeptical and doesn't make too much of an effort to reform until the very end. When Craig sacrifices himself, Seth doesn't ban eye like Jay and James do, and just thanks Craig for taking one for the team. Rogen is also very impatient about getting to heaven, believing that by complimenting Jay and James, he'd get sent up already. At the end, he sacrifices himself for Jay to go to heaven, leading to him also going to heaven. But unlike Craig, he knew that would happen, so Seth possibly just did it to go to heaven. While Seth is a very passive character, he is not downright malicious and did make it to heaven at the end, which could not be said for our bottom 3 characters. The host of The Survivors, James Franco, starts off the bottom half of this ranking. James is introduced as a very nice guy during his house party. He's friendly, tries to include Jay, and doesn't act too snobby. Once Jay and Seth return from the gas station, James leads the skepticism towards Jay regarding the beams of light that he saw. Once the apocalypse begins, James isn't pissed that he's letting all of these guys stay at his house. However, once Danny shows up, James enters into a bitter rivalry against him and his mood completely drops. He yells at him for jizzing everywhere, eating too much food, and wasting water. James also becomes more irritable as the film goes on. Near the beginning, it is revealed that he has a secret stash of food that he's only sharing with Seth, potentially leaving the others to starve. James even threatens to shoot Danny, driving Danny to leave, which would end up biting James in the butt later on. When the characters start confessing their sins and crimes, James admits that he had sex with Lindsay Lohan when she was drunk, high, and mistook him for Jake Gyllenhaal. Very sick. Once Craig sacrifices himself, Franco decides to do the same thing. He sacrifices himself to Danny and his cannibals, including Channing Tatum, to allow Jay and Seth to escape. It works and he starts to get sucked up towards heaven, but he decides to stick the middle finger towards and cuss out Danny, promptly resulting in the beam disappearing, which is one of the stupidest mistakes ever. Like, come on man, you're in the clear. He is then left on the ground for Danny and his cannibals to eat, all because he was petty, vain, and boastful. As Seth puts it, James was being a sore winner. Unlike Craig or even Seth, James clearly sacrificed himself just to get to heaven. Prior to that final scene, he would have surely ranked higher than at least Seth, but his inability to drop his rivalry of Danny leads to his downfall and places him here as the third worst main character in this movie, morally speaking. Our evil runner-up is Jonah Hill, the self-proclaimed American sweetheart. Throughout the first half of the movie, Jonah is portrayed as completely good. There is not a thing that he does that is necessarily wrong or evil. Unlike most of the celebrities at James' party, Jonah allows Jay to speak about the beams of light and tries to help him fit in. When the apocalypse starts, he tries to comfort Jay, believing that he is panicking, which could be seen as belittlement but not necessarily. When the man who's trying to get in loses his head and the head is chopped off on the ground, Jonah is the one who tells everyone that it is immoral to kick his head around. Jonah is also a notable advocate of equally dividing the resources amongst the men, as Danny mocks. However, Jonah earns his silver position of evil on this ranking for his reaction to Jay punching him. As a result of this assault, Jonah prays that God kills Jay, resulting in Jonah getting possessed by a demon. He eventually gets crushed by James Franco's burning house after his attempted exorcism. Jonah's niceness throughout this movie can be perceived as a worse self-righteousness than Jay's, as heavily implied by his prayer for death on someone, which is so sickening and gross that it allows a demon to possess him and earns him this spot. Unsurprisingly, Danny McBride takes the number 1 spot on this ranking, as the most evil main character in this film, although he is definitely the funniest. This is especially ironic considering how nice McBride allegedly is in real life. In the movie, McBride sneaks into Franco's house during his party and sleeps in his bathtub. McBride is upset that Franco didn't invite him over, but still wants to make amends for his break-in by cooking breakfast for the boys. This backfires though, as Danny is unaware of the apocalypse and ergo the scarcity of food, so his breakfast actually makes Franco and the others even angrier. McBride notoriously jizzes all over Franco's house and refuses to apologize to James for it. Danny lazily quits on helping Seth dig up the basement to retrieve water, and once the water is retrieved, he wastes a lot of it, initially out of stupidity, but then out of spite. This leads to Danny's banishment from the house. He seems to be leaving on good terms, but when James gives Danny his pistol to defend himself, Danny shoots all 5 of the guys, but luckily the gun was full of blanks. The fact that Danny could so easily shoot the others already earns him this spot, but things only get worse. Danny turns to cannibalism once he is banished from Franco's house, and forces Channing Tatum to be his gimp. When Danny encounters Seth, Jay, and James at the end, he doesn't hesitate to order his cannibals to eat them. He personally bites James' nose off and succeeds at eating him. This is the last we see of Danny, and it is by far the worst thing any of the characters did in this movie. With that in mind, Danny McBride is assuredly the morally worst main character of 2013's This Is the End. If you've seen This Is the End before, tell me in the comment section your thoughts on it. I'm not the biggest fan of Seth Rogen as a person, but as an actor and a writer, he's actually really funny, and a director. So yeah, this was a great movie. Would you be down for a sequel? Because I certainly would. But with the James Franco controversy, that really remains to be seen. Anywho, like and subscribe for more movie content, including coverage of the Mario Brothers movie, starring Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong, and also subscribe if you want to see some more video game content, because I do a lot of mostly Nintendo stuff. Anywho, thanks for watching, Happy New Year, JM Comics, out.